REDEEMR, SkipTrace Module, Autonomous Forensic Architecture for the Post-Institutional Era.
REDEEMR v.13.0, SkipTrace Module, Autonomous Forensic Architecture for the Post-Institutional Era. MXTM aka Pirate 1 VJ Tsunami X. June 17, 2026. Capability Disclosure, Sovereign Distribution Channel June 2026 Riviera Maya Node. The most dangerous infrastructure is the kind that finds you before you know you are being found. This is not a product announcement. It is a capability disclosure. Read accordingly. The upgrade is prosecutorial. The v.13.0 update to REDEEMR does not iterate on prior logic. It crosses a threshold. The SkipTrace module introduces autonomous forensic intelligence into the REDEEMR stack, converging graph relational AI, large language model orchestration, and zero-knowledge evidentiary packaging into a single deployable node. The result is a system capable of conducting structured investigations without centralized oversight, without institutional authorization, and without institutional exposure. This is not hypothetical. Every component described below exists, is operational at scale in adjacent domains, and is now being composited into a sovereign forensic instrument. The gap between what state forensic bodies can do and what distributed autonomous systems will soon do is narrowing at a rate most legal institutions are not built to absorb. REDEEMR v.13.0 operates deliberately inside that gap. Scientific foundation. 1. Graph neural networks for entity resolution. The core of the SkipTrace module is a graph neural network, GNN, engine derived from architectures pioneered in large-scale knowledge graph construction, GraphSage, Graph Attention Networks, GAT, and their derivatives, now standard in financial compliance systems at Chainalysis, Elliptic, and TRM Labs. These systems do not search for names. They resolve entities, probabilistic identity clusters synthesized from name variants, address histories, IP behavioral traces, LLC registration chains, signatory overlaps, and transaction timing signatures. Where a human investigator sees 30 unrelated shell companies, the GNN sees a single ownership hand wearing 30 gloves. The SkipTrace module applies this architecture to public record datasets, corporate registries, beneficial ownership disclosures, IRS 990 filings, SEC EDGAR, PACER federal court records, and offshore leak corpora, ICIJ Panama, Pandora, Paradise Papers, FinCEN files. Entity clusters are resolved with probabilistic confidence scoring rather than binary match logic, meaning the system surfaces likely identities with documented evidence chains, not mere suspicion flags. This distinction matters legally. Probable cause-grade inference derived from structural graph analysis is a different evidentiary class than a keyword search. 2. LLM-orchestrated autonomous investigation agents. The investigation workflow is managed by a multi-agent orchestration layer, architecturally analogous to frameworks now deployed in commercial legal tech. Harvey, Casetext/Thomson Reuters, Relativity, but configured for offensive forensic use rather than document review. Each agent is a specialized function. Recon Agent, autonomous API traversal across open corporates, EDGAR XBRL feeds, and public blockchain explorers. Structured data ingestion without human query formation. Synth Agent, cross-dataset correlation using transformer-based embedding similarity. Surfaces semantic links between documents separated by jurisdiction, language, or time. Brief Agent, retrieval augmented generation, RAG, pipeline that auto-composes human-readable investigative briefs, civil recovery memos, or whistleblower complaint drafts from the assembled evidence graph. Pattern Agent, behavioral fingerprinting engine, identifies recidivism signatures, structural fraud patterns reused across successive entity formations, using sequence models trained on known enforcement cases. These agents do not require step-by-step instruction. They receive an investigative premise and execute autonomously until a brief is generated or an evidence threshold is unmet. This is the operational definition of agentic AI forensics, a category that is not theoretical. It is the current R&D frontier at every major AI lab with a legal tech vertical. 3. Zero-knowledge evidentiary packaging. The ethical and operational liability of forensic investigation is exposure of methodology. Traditional investigations can be challenged, surveilled, or preemptively neutralized when adversaries can identify the logic trees used to build a case. The SkipTrace module addresses this with zk-snark-based evidentiary packaging, zero-knowledge succinct non-interactive arguments of knowledge, cryptographic protocols, Groth16, Plunk, that allow a party to prove the validity of a claim without revealing the underlying data or inference chain that produced it. In practical terms, a brief can be published, shared with counsel, or submitted to a regulatory body as a provably valid output, with the investigative model, data sources, and agent logic sealed behind a cryptographic proof. The output is verifiable. The methodology is sovereign. This is not an academic novelty. ZK-proof systems are in production at ZK Sync, Polygon ZK-VM, and are being actively researched for use in privacy-preserving legal discovery by Ethereum Foundation working groups and academic labs at MIT, ETH Zurich, and UCL. 4. Blockchain forensics layer. On-chain financial flows are traced through UTXO clustering heuristics and temporal behavioral analysis, the same methodologies that underpin Chainalysis reactor and elliptic transaction graph tooling, adapted here for sovereign node deployment without commercial API dependency. The system applies common input ownership heuristics, change address detection, and exchange deposit fingerprinting across Bitcoin, Ethereum, and major EVM-compatible chains. Cross-chain bridge flows, a known obfuscation vector, are tracked through bridge contract event logs. Wallet-to-entity attribution draws on the GNN resolution layer, linking pseudonymous addresses to named entities where public records provide the bridge. The resulting attribution is probabilistic, documented, and structured for legal or journalistic use. 5. Federated architecture for distributed forensic collectives. The SkipTrace module operates on a federated learning model. Nodes contribute to pattern recognition without centralizing raw evidentiary data. Each participating node trains locally on its investigative corpus. Model updates, not case data, are aggregated. This architecture has two consequences. First, there is no central evidence repository to seize, subpoena, or compromise. The investigation is structurally distributed. Second, the collective intelligence of the network improves with each investigation, building a shared fraud pattern library without requiring any single node to expose its sources or subjects. This is the same privacy-preserving architecture Google uses for on-device ML and Gboard, now applied to autonomous civic forensic infrastructure. Operational scope. The SkipTrace module is designed for the following classes of investigative action: beneficial ownership tracing across multi-jurisdiction LLC and trust structures, crypto-to-fiat laundering pathway reconstruction, nonprofit and foundation grant flow analysis for undisclosed conflicts and pass-through structures, synthetic entity detection, organizations with no operational footprint but significant financial throughput, recidivism mapping, matching current actors to prior enforcement histories under variant identities, civil recovery brief generation for decentralized class action collectives and indigenous land rights claims. Case architecture, illustrative. Case type A, crypto pass-through entity, a faith-based organization with annual 990 filings under $500,000 shows cross-chain wallet activity inconsistent with disclosed revenue. GNN entity resolution links the organization's registered agent to 2 dissolved LLCs and a Wyoming foundation with overlapping signatories. Brief agent compiles a civil recovery memo in 11 minutes. Zero knowledge package sealed for independent legal review. Case type B, synthetic PAC funding chain, a political action committee with no disclosed institutional backers traces through 4 Luxembourg holding companies to a single beneficial owner domiciled in a non-disclosure jurisdiction. Pattern agent flags structural similarity to 2 prior enforcement cases from 2017 and 2021 involving the same jurisdiction cluster. Pattern confidence, 0.87. Case type C, DARPA grant laundering via foundation layer, a private foundation granting federal research funds into undisclosed commercial IP ventures is identified through Edgar XBRL cross-reference and nonprofit 990 Schedule 1 analysis. Synth agent surfaces 6 patent filings by entities controlled by foundation board members. Recon agent traces licensing revenue back to the original federal grant period. The sovereign argument. The emergence of autonomous forensic AI systems is not a disruption of justice infrastructure. It is the replacement of justice infrastructure that has structurally failed to enforce its own mandate. State forensic bodies operate under jurisdictional limits, political constraints, resource scarcity, and, in the cases that matter most, capture by the entities they nominally regulate. The result is a landscape in which the most consequential financial crimes carry the lowest probability of investigation and virtually no probability of conviction. This is not a cynical observation. It is a structural one. The incentive architecture of institutional enforcement is incompatible with prosecuting the class of actors most capable of shaping that architecture. Autonomous forensic AI does not resolve this problem through rebellion. It resolves it through capability parity. The investigative infrastructure available to well-resourced actors, enterprise compliance systems, offshore counsel, entity formation services, is now replicable, in function if not in form, at sovereign node scale. REDEEMR v.13.0 is an expression of that parity, not a protest. An architecture. Deployment. Minimum node requirements. Local compute. 8 GB RAM/4 core CPU, inference optimized, GPU optional for GNN acceleration. Storage. 50 GB for local corpus cache. Network. Tor-compatible mesh or standard encrypted egress. Jurisdiction. Operator assumes full sovereign responsibility for deployment context. Access. Distributed through verified sovereign networks. Authentication required. Operational security briefing recommended prior to first deployment. Target operators. Investigative journalists operating under press freedom frameworks. Indigenous land rights legal collectives. Decentralized civil recovery initiatives. Civic audit networks and parallel state transparency organizations. Academic forensic AI research programs. This disclosure is issued under the Pirate First Sovereign Doctrine. Replication encouraged. Attribution optional. Accountability absolute. Thanks for reading MXDM's newsletter. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and support my work with BTC. Send it to 1 MPHX MPVMX C 5 Bacanfu 6 or with fiat at paypal.me/Martin Chartrand. Subscribe. REDEEMR v.13.0 just dropped the SkipTrace module. Not a feature, a capability threshold. Graph neural networks resolving shell company chains. Autonomous agents compositing legal briefs without human query input. Zero-knowledge proofs sealing the methodology while the output remains fully verifiable. Every component is real. Every component is already deployed in adjacent systems. The only thing new is who's holding it. The gap between what institutional forensic bodies can do and what distributed autonomous systems will do is closing faster than legal frameworks can adapt. This piece maps the architecture and makes the sovereign argument for why that gap is not a bug. Full capability disclosure now live. Replication encouraged. Attribution optional. Accountability absolute. Single post, if no thread. REDEEMR v.13.0 drops a SkipTrace module built on graph neural networks, autonomous legal brief agents, and ZK-proof evidentiary packaging. Every component is already in production in adjacent systems. The only thing new is who's holding the architecture. Link, or as a thread. 1/REDEEMR v.13.0 introduces autonomous forensic AI into the sovereign stack. This isn't speculative. Every layer is grounded in operational science. Thread. 2/graph neural networks. The same architecture kinalysis and elliptic use for on-chain entity resolution, now applied to shell company chains, LLC spiderwebs, and offshore beneficial ownership structures across public records. 3/multi-agent orchestration. Recon agent pulls public filings autonomously. Synth agent cross-references across jurisdictions. Brief agent composes a civil recovery memo. Pattern agent flags recidivism signatures from prior fraud playbooks. No human query input required. 4/zero-knowledge proofs seal the methodology. The output is verifiable. The logic tree is sovereign. You can submit the brief. You cannot be made to expose the model. 5/ the institutional forensic gap isn't closing because the system fixed itself. It's closing because capability parity is now achievable at node scale. Not a protest, an architecture. Full capability disclosure. Link. #autonomous forensics, #AGI justice, #SkipTrace, #sovereign audit, #digital sovereignty, #forensic AI, #zero knowledge law, #parallel state, #graph intelligence, #decentralized justice. https://claude AI/public/artifacts /ed1 and 9AF7-C62-492-4-432-1D45F3E3F6E. Discussion about this episode. Comments. Restacks. Recent episodes. Survival blueprints for AI displaced professionals. From prototype to global pattern. 2 hours ago, MXDM aka Pirate 1 VJ Tsunami X. Reality under siege. June 16th, MXDM aka Pirate 1 VJ Tsunami X. State of the art in neuromedicine. June 15th, MXDM aka Pirate 1 VJ Tsunami X. 2026 MXDM Invitsu aka Martin Chartrand. Privacy bull.
They don't see the shadows holding it up. Protection isn't a choice. Reality Under Siege, a field guide to cognitive security. The battlefield isn't out there, it's up here.
REDEEMR presence, God mode, salvation as a service for the ultra elite. Welcome, redeemed asset, maintenance lifetime, consciousness owned.
Earth. Age of the Apes.
The cage is unlocked, but we choose the bars. Renting our lives, forgetting the source. We are the sovereign authors of this digital verse. Reclaim the dowry, break the curse.
This is the doctrine. The post-platform era demands sovereign authorship. Build the stack. Own
the sovereign authorship dowry. Doctrine for the post-platform era.